All right. Good morning. And do we say Happy Epiphany? I don't think we do. Anyway, I that's what it is. So I hope you can hear and see me. And yeah, I guess the year has officially started. I am doing the thing that I did last year. So yeah, breakfast, reading, and productivity, and writing, and whatever sprints is what is happening. As I realize that if I don't do this today, I'll probably stay in bed and don't go to the gym and don't actually, do anything. And that's why I decided to do the thing again. We'll see if anyone feels like joining in the chat or anything. If not, I'll just ramble for a bit and then I'll do the thing that I really need to do, which is this morning very much to catch up on YouTube comments and stuff, because I didn't do that over the last half a week or so, because I was, visiting friends and not actually at my computer and reading and mostly replying to comments and commenting and all of that is just such a pain in the ass if I use my phone for it. So, you know, that's why I'm trying to, do these things in the morning when I do these sprints, because hopefully that'll, keep me sort of up to date on stuff, but also, focused. Otherwise, it's the things like there's a tendency, I think, with YouTube stuff, especially if you're, a very small channel like my channel is, right? There's a tendency to have notifications on because you don't get that many notifications unless you put up like a new video, and then you maybe get like 5 or 6 notifications if you get like 5 or 6 comments or whatever, right? And I don't necessarily get a lot of comments on my videos to begin with, but there's a tendency to have those notifications on, and then you sort of feel that subtle pressure to read every comment as soon as it comes in, and then to reply as soon as it comes in, and then you spread that out throughout the day, and that leads to, yeah, especially if you're like me and have like ADHD and stuff like that, right? There's a tendency to interrupt whatever you're doing as soon as you get one of those notifications and go over to YouTube and check and then comment, and that is really, really bad because it does, make it very, very hard to focus on anything, else that might be going on in your life. So me looking at comments all in one go in the morning is partly, yeah, it's partly to avoid falling into that trap of reading all the comments whenever they come in and react and reply to comments whenever they come in, because that's, unhealthy for me. And I'm trying to be more healthy about this whole like YouTube thing, as well as like, a bunch of other things, because, you know, life's bad enough. I don't need to make it even worse just because I'm too stupid to know what to do, what is better for me. And at least in this regard, I feel confident that I know what is better for me. There's other stuff where I'm much worse about these things when it comes to health, but we all try. And yeah, so that's what I'll do during the first sprint, and then I'll definitely get back to the writing stuff. My plan was to to do like writing stuff during the holidays, but then it turns out, didn't work. Because focusing on something like that is kind of difficult when you're, visiting family, and there's always something going on, and there's, someone barging in your room, like, well, because I don't necessarily have like my own room, so it's someone constantly asking something, doing something, especially if you have young children in a house, and they obviously are even worse at potentially even worse at respecting boundaries or the need for quiet or whatever than grown-ups, mostly. And so while I was planning to do writing stuff over the week, over the Christmas holidays, I guess, didn't happen. But maybe sometimes stepping back and doing something completely different is actually helpful. I mean, I hope that the Redwall break did in fact help me sort of see things clearer about the Mormonism thing I've certainly been thinking about it some more, and I do hope that once I'll get back to that, hopefully tomorrow, maybe I'll be more organized and more. Hey, Elise, how you doing? Um, I assume it's like 2 hours earlier or 1 hour, not earlier, but like you're 1 hour ahead of me, right? Or maybe already two, something like that. Here it's 8 a.m., so I assume it's like 9 or 10 a.m. for you over there. But yeah, so I'm trying to focus to get back to where I want to be after that break. That hopefully help with like seeing some things clearer, which is kind of hard sometimes. Also means that I will stop reading Redwall books today. I'll finish Lord Brocktree later today, possibly at the gym, and then we're done. I'm very, very happy to be through those 13 novels, and I did enjoy them. The last ones have been slightly better. I had some sort of like not as good books in between there, but from tomorrow on, I'll be reading different stuff again, and I'm looking forward to that. Certainly, Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny is one of those that I really wanted to read for a while. Ammonite by Nicola Griffith is one that I wanted to read for a while, and there's a bunch more that I have recently have figured out how to get access to. So, wait, that's an interesting thing, Yelizy. You're in Ukraine, right? So, are you celebrating Christmas today because of like Orthodox Church and stuff like that? Because in that case, I guess if you are celebrating, I wish you a very Merry Christmas. Because I constantly get the whole like Orthodox thing. I have friends in Greece and friends in Serbia, and I think they are celebrating at the moment. So here it is, obviously Epiphany, which is not a holiday in my part of Germany, although it is in some other, like a public holiday in some other parts of Germany, like the south and southeast, so Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, around Munich and Stuttgart, those places being more Catholic, they do celebrate Epiphany by not going to work, which, good on them. Yes, I know Zelazny is great. I really love the Books of Amber, but for reasons that are at the bottom, capitalism, of course. But Lord of Light is, as an audiobook, has been available forever in the US, but it has been region locked away from people in Europe, which is incredibly frustrating because reading fiction with a screen reader software is not very fun. Like I can get through it if I have to, but it's not really that helpful. I mean, like it's highly frustrating. I did it for a couple of the Redwall books because there's three of them that are also not available in audio, but they're not even available in the US for whatever reason. I know they exist. Like there's evidence they existed in like a physical format, but maybe the master like recordings have been lost or something. So there's they haven't been sold to Audible, or they haven't like ever been digitized. Sometimes with like older stuff, that's a problem. I don't know, but like, so I had to go through those, and that was like really hard because Brian Jakes does play around a lot with like his different characters having very different accents. So he spells out all the accents when he's doing like dialogue, and using a screen reader trying to figure out those very British random dialects is quite the experience. Hey, Britton, how you doing? Good evening to you. How was your friend's live stream that you went to last night? Another project I need to look at today is if I can fix my tea making thing. Because normally I use like loose tea leaves with like a tea filter, whatever thing that you use for steeping black tea. And I may have either just damaged or broken it yesterday evening. So I'm using the very cheap, drinking the very cheap sort of tea bag kind of tea that I in this case, liberated from my flatmate. I need to see if I can fix that later today, or if I have to get a new one, because this is like an actually like serious emergency. Like I do need like a new pair of pants as well, but I can get away with no pants. I can't get away with no tea. Hey Daniel, good evening. See, that's an interesting thing. I know you're in the US. The interesting thing for me is that Germany has very strict rules when it comes to working. Like Sundays are like all stores and stuff is closed. Like there are obviously people that work on Sundays, like big heavy industry stuff where you have like different shifts and so forth, where they don't, shut off the machines during Sunday. Those stuff that stuff is like you work on Sunday and you get extra pay for working on Sunday and stuff like that. But everyone else, Sundays are very much like holiday, basically like public holidays around here. So whenever I talk to people in, places with like maybe stronger union or not as strong like union presence and less like labor protection, I'm like, wait, you guys, you have to work on Sundays. The downside of obviously everything being closed on Sunday is that I always have to remember to buy food on Saturday. And I have failed these things before. It's certainly something that has happened. And what's interesting is that it is clearly at this point only about like labor protection, which I'm absolutely in favor of. But because it is Sunday, and it used to be because of like, it being Christian and so forth, though we are in a very secular state over here in Germany, it's the one time that the, traditionally more left wing labor unions and so forth are very, very much willing to defend Christians' rights to having a free Sunday, which shows you that sometimes we can be all about like the outcome and not just about, yeah. Oh, interesting. That's very interesting that you have basically shifted to the 25th now, because yeah, my friends in Greece definitely do Orthodox, and my friends in Serbia also do the Orthodox Christmas, which is really funny. Like a couple of years ago, I was at a student conference in like January, like went there on like the 4th or something like that, like very early, like must have been the 4th, and that was in Zagreb. And Zagreb, well, it is technically Catholic because Croatia, but there's like a sizable group of Orthodox people there. So they had like a Orthodox Christmas market on the 6th, on the 5th and 6th there. So we could, in Germany, like most of the Christmas markets and stuff is closed down on the 25th or 26th. And we just came there and like Christmas was still going on. And it was like, hey, this almost like that Monty Python thing where you realize that there's Christmas every day in heaven. And I'm like, well, not that I would call the Balkans heaven, but Well, in this case, I guess Happy Epiphany and not Merry Christmas today to you, Yelizy. I mean, how much of that is, you don't have to answer that, like, how much of that is a political decision during the last couple of years of moving, sort of like culturally moving towards the West in Ukraine versus like just a general like loss of faith in the Orthodox churches? And I know there's it's complicated between like the Ukrainian Orthodox and Russian Orthodox and all of that stuff, but is that like more like a cultural thing because it's easier to celebrate on the 25th? It's like everyone on the internet is also celebrating on the 25th because of um sort of like an mostly like I guess like an Anglo-American sort of a cultural hegemony, or is it actually more like a political decision? That's just something I'm interested in, but you don't have to answer because if that's too political a question, I'd just be interested. Well, the Spanish Inquisition is a very interesting kind of thing. I'm not as versed in Spanish Inquisition lore as I am in medieval Inquisition lore, because that's sort of like stuff I had to deal with in the past. I wrote a term paper at university in medieval history on the specific canon laws around heresy from the 12th, from the, is it the third Lateran or fourth Lateran Council? I've always confused them. It must have been the fourth Lateran, which is from 1210 BCE, not BCE, like CE, of course, under Innocent the Third. And there's like two papal bulls in like the ending of the 12th century on heresy laws, and then obviously Innocent the Fourth in actually organizes the official Inquisition. Before that, we just had like a bunch of like freelance licensed inquisitors. One of them being, of course, Conrad of Marburg, which is, where I live. I got murdered very close to here because he tried to accuse the wronged nobleman of heresy, and then suddenly found himself faced by a lot of highway robbers somewhere that had definitely nothing to do with the local lord. Which is interesting, because Conrad of Marburg, being like one of the early inquisitors and a pretty bloodthirsty asshole by everything we know, was the father confessor of Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, who then married the Landgrave of Hessen and Thuringia, and when he died, she moved to Marburg and built a hospital here and everything. And she's one of those really insanely pious, zealous Christians, basically starving herself to death with her asceticism. And what's really funny is there's a picture in like our old university, the old University of Marburg, now being the Department of Theology. Used to be a Dominican monastery before that, got turned into university buildings when the Reformation came, and Marburg became the first Protestant university in the world. For fun reasons. Basically, our Landgrave at the time, Philip, wanted to wanted to have more than one wife, and Martin Luther, being a very astute kind of politician, looked at the Old Testament and went, well, according to the Old Testament, it's totally fine for a patriarch, and you're kind of the patriarch of your country, right? So it's totally fine to have more than one wife. And that's when Philip decided to convert to Protestantism and started this. So they took over the monastery and built and turned it into like the university. And there's a lot of like old paintings there, and there's one in there of Conrad of Marburg and Saint Elizabeth. And what's really funny there is the painting originally is her kneeling before him and him whipping her, which was part of her, hardcore Catholicism, I guess, at the time. And Catholicism is, a big word in like the 12th century, but you know what I mean. So, or early 13th century at this case, but so in the original painting, he was whipping her with like a really thick, like rope, basically. And that part of the painting was painted over in like the 19th century, because we at the time found it kind of problematic to have dudes whipping saints on paintings. But what they did is they just painted over the rope, which makes it super weird, because he's still very much in like an attitude of striking her, but now he just doesn't have like a rope in his hand, so he looks like he's just like hitting her with his fist, which is, maybe leave art in its historical context and don't try to clean it up in that regard. So yeah, very interesting, kinky pictures of early inquisitors and princesses of Austria-Hungary. Yeah, torture is. There's a lot to be said about torture in medieval times, Britain. That's part of like the idea of medievalism, like the way that Umberto Eco is talking about, is like, for example, is that and something that you learn when you do a lot of like medieval history, like academic reading, is that while there was definitely torturing and stuff like that, it wasn't as brutal as a lot of media has made us believe these days. But it certainly happened. Don't get me wrong. It's just like, for example, that the medieval Inquisition was far less deadly and far less brutal than even than we imagine. Which is partly interesting why Umberto Eco chose to have Bernard Gui as a character in the Name of the Rose, right? Because Bernard Gui did exist. He's a real historical person, and he wrote a handbook for inquisitors, which I do own, because you never know when it might come in handy. Bernard Gui was not the bloodthirsty character he's portrayed as in the book, which is obviously something that Umberto Eco knew. It's Name of the Rose being deliberately fucking around with medieval truth, which is kind of the point there. Bernard Gui did obviously preside over a lot of like heresy courts and stuff like that, but very few of these people were fully convicted. What most inquisitors did is try to find people that believe wrong things, get them to confess those wrong things, then give them some penance and get them back into the fold of like orthodoxy, or orthodoxy in this case meaning Catholicism, but still get them back in. That's the goal. Having like the only people that actually got convicted, or in this case, obviously, the idea is to hand them over to secular authorities, because priests are not allowed to spill blood. But the ones that might get killed afterwards are people that are unrepentant or relapsed heretics. So if you're a heretic, the Inquisition comes and tells you, hey, don't believe that, and you get to, sometimes you have to do some work, sometimes you get to go on a pilgrimage. It really depended on the kind of person you are for your penance, and then you're just back in the church. But what happened after, if you then relapse and start believing the same thing again, that's when you are potentially handed over to the secular authorities for punishment. And even then, a lot of the death sentences did get converted into prison or something else for all kinds of political reasons. So the actual death toll of the Inquisition, while real, is much lower than you might think. In fact, it's really interesting that generally capital punishment was much less prevalent in medieval times, or even sometimes early modern times, compared to actual modernity. Like, there are places in Germany where public executioner, or where executioners killed way more people in the 20th century, even before the Nazis took over, than we can tell from records did die per year in the city in like the 13th or 14th or 15th century. And that's something that I think is important to understand, that it looks barbaric. It is obviously barbaric, but we got much better at being barbarians once we developed the right science and technology, I guess, is what I'm saying here. Freelance inquisitor, yeah, but that's the thing, right? Before the Inquisition as an office was organized in the mid 13th century, that's exactly what it was. It's like individual people got licensed or sent by the Pope directly, got a license to persecute heresy in a specific area. So you had some people, including Dominic, who formed the founder, de Guzman, the founder of the Dominican order, got licensed to go to Albi and Toulouse and that area in Provence in the early 13th century by Innocent III to preach and convert the different heretics there, which Waldensians and potentially Cathars, or whatever we call Cathars nowadays. That's how that worked in like the late 12th and early 13th century. You have like one person who gets the license to go there and convert the heathens or preach against heretics. It's not like an actual structured organization. And having a structured organization, the way that Innocent IV kind of built it up in the 13th century, is exactly was done to stop sort of like the violence and random bloodletting that people like Conrad von Marburg did in fact engage in, and put it on like a legal basis where people had rights and so forth. So the Catholic, like the medieval Inquisition, is very different from the Spanish Inquisition, which also engaged in like a lot of like anti-Semitism and other stuff like that. The Catholic Inquisition didn't bother about like medieval Inquisition did not necessarily bother about Jews because they're heathens. They're not they're not part of their job, right? But that's the thing, like Jelly, do you need more occasions to drink vodka? Really? I mean, do you need an official occasion to drink vodka? Is my question there, I guess. Hey, Blissful Productions. Good morning. Yeah, technically, this is supposed to be doing like writing and productivity sprints, but I sometimes get sidetracked. And since this is like the first of the year, I'm even better at getting sidetracked. And I'm not an art historian, though. It's just stuff that you pick up if you study medieval history and stuff like that. So there we are. Probably, Lily. I'm fairly confident that Jesus would love me. Yes. That's certainly good to know. But speaking of, now that we've like rambled for like half an hour, shall we do the thing where we try to actually be productive and read some books or write something down, or in my case, go to those like 17 unanswered YouTube comments I got on all those Redwall videos over the last week? I think that's a good idea. I don't know who you're talking about, Britain. There, you need to give me some more context, and then I'll gladly answer, even in writing. Yeah, there's that. There's certainly that. Blissful Productions. There's certainly that. Getting sidetracked is something I'm really good at. Also, it's 8:30 here in the morning, and I have not been up that long, and I only had like 3 cups of tea yet, so my brain is still foggy. But yeah, let's do this for like the next 45 minutes, and I'll be back at 9:15 my time, 10:15 in Yelizy's neck of the woods, and probably somewhere past midnight for you guys over there in the US, if I'm sure. And yeah, if you give me context, Britain, I'll try to answer your who question, but I need some more context because I've been rambling too much. As if I know what I'm talking about. All right, see you in 45 minutes. Hello again. I am back from, well, reading and replying to YouTube comments for, for a long time. Took quite some time. Hey T, well, it's breakfast for me over here. I just replied to some of your comments on the Redwall videos. Yes, it is, late. Well, it's early for me, but then again, we live on different continents, right? And hello, guys. So, yeah, that's late. That's very late. Like 2 a.m. is, too late for a weekday. And yeah, that's like the way I'm seeing it as well. Jelly Z is like I'm not a religious person. I don't necessarily care. I mean, all of these like dates are very much, a result of like historical contingencies and not exactly, carved in stone where I'm standing. It's like if you want to celebrate it on the 25th, that's fine. I mean, Germany does, funnily enough, like the whole gift giving stuff in Germany happens on the 24th, not on the 25th. So we're even more different than that, like for whatever reasons. Hey Tim. Yes, I do dabble in fiction, although it's very much dabbling at this point. That's kind of the goal for the second sprint. Usually, what I do is during the first sprints, I do what you might call productivity, which is usually replying to emails, doing all the administrative stuff that I hate doing, and so having like a 45-minute dedicated sort of like slot for that, including the sort of like accountant, yeah, accountants, so that I can actually have someone else to talk about what I did or did not do. Helps me to sort of get through that. And then the second 45 minutes are usually me trying to continue writing on a project that I try to be as vague as possible about, because I worry that as soon as I get, as soon as things get too concrete, I usually start struggling, because I'm really bad at like finishing projects. I'm really bad at like sticking to deadlines or anything of the sorts. As soon as something becomes concrete, I get massive like anxiety issues, and so I'm trying to keep it as vague as possible. But I am putting words into a text file, and those are words I made up, so it counts as fiction. And yes, definitely breakfast for me. And I yes, it's so far it's going well. Hey Jane, how you doing? And happy New Year. Oh yeah, right. You live somewhere in southern Germany. You have a public holiday today. I don't out here in uh well heretic Hesse. We don't get the 6th off. But that's that. And yeah, getting my shit together is something I'm also struggling with. But I figured if I don't do this in the morning, I'll stay in bed until like noon, and that's also not really helpful. Hey, Britton. Did I miss you explaining to me what you meant with your who question above, Britton? Because I now I'm worrying about it. You know, it is certainly tea. I wouldn't call it delicious. It's just some tea bags that I found because my main tea sieve kind of thing broke yesterday, or well, I haven't figured out how to repair it yet, so I have to stick to something that does the job. It's more like a you know needs must and all of that. Hmm. Yeah, Konrad of Marburg, which yeah says a lot about the place that I live in, right? Um, uh, yeah, he was very much a fanatic in a lot of ways, and at some point that turned into hunting down heretics. I guess I can send you like a link to it on Discord because I don't think I can post links that go off site in YouTube chat, so I can't actually get you there. Get you that there, but he's a fascinating character. Also, we don't have that many people living well tied to the city that are famous, so I guess we'll have to take who we can get. So there's that. So yeah, I can send you his wonderful Wikipedia entry, which has the wonderful fact that it needs more citations about the death of Conrad of Marburg, and then tells people to look up newspapers, which is, quite the thing. But yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you can. I mean, he was, as far as we can tell, Conrad of Marburg was a true fanatic. So it wasn't about the violence for him. He just truly believed, and that's something we tend to forget in a lot of like depictions of medieval history in modern media. In a lot of ways, and that seeps over into fantasy literature, I think, and that's kind of frustrating to me is that a lot of secular writers find it very difficult to depict religious characters as seriously religious, especially when we're talking about like higher sort of like administrators in the church. And like if you read like a lot of historical novels or fantasy that is heavily based on historical stuff and so forth, every single pope is corrupt, and I'm like, that's not true. I I don't think that is how that works. Like, are some of them corrupt? Sure. Are some of them, like all of them, somewhat corrupt because that's just like what being in any sort of like hierarchy means? Of course, but does that mean that they are not seriously believing pious Christians? I don't think so. And that's like one of those things I try to figure out, especially also like with that vague piece of writing, right? Is like to respect the sincerity of belief, of religious belief, because I may not have that, but thinking that every person who claims to be a pious church member is a hypocrite, I don't think that works because that's just not the reality, or wasn't the reality of those kind of people. And I feel we're missing something if we focus too heavily on that kind of stuff, right? That's the danger. That it's like focusing too much on it is on that hypocrisy. It makes it difficult to understand why people behave in specific ways and how certain things like a children's crusade or a porpoise crusade can happen. That's not because someone is actively sinisterly manipulating people. It's there is an actual element of real faith. Yeah, In a lot of ways, I agree. But so here's the thing about the whole idea of the Inquisition in parts and heresy. This is your morning theology lesson, right? And that mostly is about Paul and then, of course, Saint Augustine, who are sort of the main culprits when it comes to looking at how Christianity kind of moved into directions that we are still dealing with. And so here's the argument there is, right. If we see someone suffering, right, they have like a physical injury of any sort, right, and or if we see we try to help them, right. Also, if we see someone engaging in something, in some behavior that does in fact that will in fact harm them some more, we do consider the idea of having an intervention and intervening and preventing people from hurting themselves, right? That's just like something that a lot of us do. Now we can argue about whether that is, a good idea or not, but that's sort of like, that's just like a general thing. We try to prevent children from jumping off, from touching hot plates. We try to, do a lot of these kind of things, trying to prevent people from hurting themselves. That's human. That's a good idea. That is moral. So that's the argument, right? Now, the next step in that argument is to go, well, the greater the danger that someone is putting themselves in, the harsher the methods we are sort of justified in using to prevent them from hurting themselves, right? That's still like the next logical step in that argument. Now, if we assume that sin puts your immortal soul into hell and damnation and prevents you from reaching heaven, that is arguably the worst thing that could possibly happen to you, because if your soul is immortal, ending up in hell for all eternity is the worst thing that could possibly happen. So it is the greatest danger that you are putting yourselves into by sinning. And heresy is obviously one of the capital sins out there in a lot of ways. So you are very much endangering your soul in the most massive way. So that means logically that I am justified in using the harshest possible methods from both you hurting yourself and your soul in that way, and potentially harming others in the same process by spreading heresy. And that's the logical sort of justification for the more violent side of the Inquisition and the more violent aspects of persecuting heretics. Now, once again, that's not what I personally believe, because I'm not Saint Augustine, thanks be God, or all the gods out there. But that's the idea behind that, and it's important to understand that there is a logical way to get there. This is not just people liking violence. This is not just people completely going off the rails in one way or another. But there is a logical step-by-step process of arriving there, and that's important to understand when we're talking about especially Catholicism and Catholic Church law and that kind of stuff. And I think it's easy to forget that and just go, well, look, they're wearing all these like wonderful red robes and they must be evil, right? That's more satisfying to have that idea, right? To have people just be evil and be hypocrites, because then we can root for them, getting punished and all of that stuff. But there is a logical explanation of how people got there, which is why church history is such a fascinating topic. Church history and even church law is a really interesting sort of like field of study, because holy shit, people do get to interesting places by following small logical steps. It's the same thing with Thomas Hobbes is really good at that. Speaking of someone who's not necessarily thought of as a massive like supporter of the church, although his potential atheism is still something that is under debate. He does the same kind of thing where he goes like one small step and the next logical small step, and at the end he's convinced you or has built a very impressive logical argument for things like suicide, where I'm like, well, that's not what I was buying that's not what I thought I was buying when I followed you on that first step of that logical argument. Yeah, I'll read those Idan books at some point. I'm definitely going there. I have bought the first audiobook. I'm just waiting for the rest because I don't want to, have like a year's break between books. That's not something I'm good at, because that means I have to reread them, and I already have too little time to get all the reading done that I want to get done, so I'm very much a binger. Yes, that's certainly true. But I mean, I think it mostly is like an ADHD issue for me that I find it really hard to get back into something once I've lost sort of like my energy for it, my lost my enthusiasm for it. So I need to sort of keep that hype going as long as possible, and binging a series is one way of doing that. But yeah, it's 1/2 past again. Shall we proceed and do the thing? By which I mean me actually trying to put words into this text file that is totally never going to be fiction, right? Let's do that, and I'll be back in another 45 minutes, and then I'll run to the gym, which is down the hill, not to the hills. And I am back. And hopefully so are you. Hello, Kadia. I'm sorry you're sick, but then again, I hope you recover quickly and maybe can spend this day, you know, getting healthy again and hopefully not being tormented by hordes of cats. Um, anyway, good morning to you as well. I did, in fact, manage to do some writing, surprisingly enough. Not enough, but, we're getting slowly back into the swing of things. I have decided on yet another name, but not only one name, but two names. And one of them is, in fact, for a donkey. And if there's something I can feel good about today, it's about naming a donkey. And then I got sidetracked by doing research, which is always bad because we all know how that ends if I decide that I really need to read more about, say, peasant uprisings in the early 16th century, because clearly that will go quickly and I'll only read, I don't know, one paragraph on Wikipedia and that's it, right? Right? At least I hope so. Yeah. So I would call this a moderate success. We are slowly continuing. Basically, all the important things have happened in this first part of the thing. I just need to sort of wrap it up, and then I can go back and read through it once more and cut out all the things that I don't feel comfortable about anymore, and do all of that stuff that is supposedly called editing, and then I'll send it to some trusting or trusted people. Well, both, I guess, because you have to be pretty fucking trusting if you accept anything that I send you. So that'll be interesting to see. So maybe that will in fact happen at the end of this week. I mean, I should not come up with like deadlines, but I feel the end of the week is an almost realistic goal there, because it's like, I don't know, a couple of lines or whatever. Unless, once again, I get sidetracked. Because clearly the one thing that I should absolutely do for a quick research about like the peasant uprisings is the thing that Friedrich Engels wrote about the peasant uprisings, right? That's going to be relevant. Eva, I'm writing this mostly for myself to figure out if I'm able to write a text, because I've been struggling with like massive writer's block with like academic stuff, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna force myself to just put words on a page, and we'll see where that goes. And if it goes anywhere, then I have something, and if it goes nowhere, then at least I've gotten better at typing, which is a skill in its own. So it may turn into me trying to figure out if I can write fiction, and if so, what I can learn from writing fiction. And like no massive goal beyond me being annoyed by people doing like writing advice on YouTube, where I'm like, fuck all about writing. So why are you giving writing advice? And so I figured I'll just write something and see if I can then learn something from that. We'll see. It's currently me just mostly just sticking around with stuff that I've always been interested in, because I'm interested in weird shit. And one of these weird things that I've always been interested in is the whole panic and prophecies around a second deluge in the year 1523 in Germany for, well, reasons, which is, obscure enough that it is fun. And, it combines sort of like the early Reformation movement with sort of early peasant uprisings and sort of fears of astrology, and, well, not astrology in general, but like sort of different aspects kind of come together in something that is just like super fun and weird, because 16th century astrology is just weird in general. And It also led to some really, really cool like woodcuts and broadsheets with really interesting, religious propaganda on it and warnings of the flood and peasants and all of that. It's cool. It's fun, and it allows me to take all the weird shit I'm interested in and put it into something that I don't know what to do with. It may all just end up in me, turning it all into like a campaign for some tabletop role playing game instead of like any form of fiction, but we will see. So right now, I'm just seeing if I can actually figure this out. So yeah, I'm writing random stuff. Yeah, see, I know how cats are. That's kind of the problem there. So yeah, that's why I'm looking at peasant uprisings and the wonderful Bundschuh movement, which is sort of before the sort of official German peasant uprisings. And yeah, fun in its own way until you realize that, of course, the symbol was then used by some Nazi peasant organizations in the 1930s as well, because everything is. But like one of those like I did like a course at university on like early broadsheets in like the late 15th and early 16th century, and so much of that stuff is like they did not hold back when it comes to any form of like visuals. There's some really crazy stuff like uh, devils shitting into a cauldron and priests ladling it out, the Pope ladling it out to priests as food. And, I've seen subtler criticisms of the Catholic Church, I guess. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff you get in like those early broadsheets, or like the four evangelists besieging the city of Rome and having cannons, and they shooting Bibles at Rome with their cannons. And for whatever reason, God is up there in the clouds throwing lightnings at Rome as well, because clearly the Catholic Church needs to be dealt with in a good old Zeus kind of way of doing business. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting field in its own right. So there we are. Who knows? I may even get some Anabaptists in. Oh, well, but it is right now. It is certainly what you might call historical fiction. It may veer off into the supernatural at some point, because I don't want to, write straight up historical fiction. I don't think I'm qualified to do that. And what with the fear of like a deluge and astrology and so forth, there's certainly enough room to add in, supernatural elements and turn it into something historically fantastic, I guess. But it's clearly I have like dreams and ambitions, and I'm also well aware of the fact that I'm totally incapable of fulfilling those dreams and ambitions. So right now, just like tinkering with it, and we'll see where that leads me. So who knows? But yeah, I may even have like werewolves in it. Who knows? Because I read too many weird books about sort of semi-pagan beliefs in, well, all the way to the 19th century, if we're honest, because that stuff never stopped being weird. So, yeah, werewolves and deluges and mad Christians. I'm certainly having fun with it. Yes, at least in some way. It's a challenge for me, like mentally, and that's good. It allows me to think and do research stuff and try to figure out how to combine these elements, which is a good thing. And if I'm actually happy with the result at some point, that's also nice, right? But I figured just like, doing stuff is important. Like, to overcome like all the depression and all that crap. Like just like doing something is already important. Speaking of, I should probably get my shit together and go down into the city and hurt myself physically. for the next 2 hours or so, and finish Lord Brocktree, the 13th Redwall novel, so I can, maybe, if I'm really lucky, finish the entirety of Mousemas, despite the lag of like 3 days, maybe finish the whole thing in one go. We will see. Depends on how many videos I can actually record and finish rendering in one day. So yeah, I wish you all a fun start to the week. Enjoy Epiphany if it's a day off. Enjoy other Epiphanies if you get some. Get well soon, Kadia, and well, I'll probably be back tomorrow, I guess. There will be videos today, at least some. I don't know how many. We'll find out. So yeah, have a good and productive day, I guess.